So I want to welcome everyone to the 8th Ron Paul Institute Washington Conference. If you can believe it, we've done this 8 times. People say, why do you go to Washington, D.C.? It's terrible, and it is terrible, but that's why we come here. Because there's the one thing the regime doesn't want us to do is to get together. And we're getting together in their own front yard, in their own backyard. If you look around this corridor, the 28 corridor, that's where the military-industrial complex lives. Those are the people who suck us dry and bomb the rest of the world. They don't want us to do what we're doing, which is to be here, to talk to each other, to get together. That's why they want to silence us. And that's why we are determined to come here in their face and continue to meet as long as we can. Because not allowing us to meet is the goal of the regime. So that's why we're here. And today thank you. And that's why this year is also a little bit different, because usually we talk about war and peace, and we talk about civil liberties, and those are all very important. But this year, this is the year of the Republican platform, the Kamala platform, this platform, the other. Well, what about the Liberty platform? That's what we're here for. And it's beyond just foreign policy. It's beyond civil liberties. We're talking today about food freedom, about medical freedom. It's all together. It's all interrelated. And that's the reason why we're doing things a little bit different today. I do want to say also, this is an analog event. This is not digital. This is real. This is the real world. You know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I often feel like I'm living in the Matrix where everything is fake. Our food is fake. Our politicians are fake. Our government is fake. We have a fake person. We have 2 fake people running for president. But this is the analog world. Listen, we forgot to print some signs, and so we wrote them. That's the analog world that we live in. This is real people, and we're reclaiming this analog world, the real world. So I do want to do a couple of thank yous before we start. And first of all, and most importantly, I do want to thank our sponsors. We have Gold and Silver Committee. These are the people who give their hard-earned money to us to help us put on an event like this. An event like this is very expensive. It costs a lot of money, and there are some very wonderful and generous people who allow it to happen. And these people are in exchange, by the way, if you're interested next time perhaps, we have some side events, some special events for them. But most importantly, I do want to thank the Gold and Silver sponsors for making this happen. So let's give them some applause, please. And as always, I want to thank my family for helping out. They've always done this since we started. And people say, well, why do you have your family help? Well, I trust them. And I'm a bit of a control freak, and they're good at it now, and my kids are getting older, which makes me a little sad because they're going on to do things, but they still take some time out to be with all of you and to be with me, and I appreciate all of them. So thanks for being there. And here's some good news, because we need some good news today, that this is the largest audience we've had in several years. So more people coming is great news, because that's what the regime hates as well. So thank all of you, because without you it would be very boring. You do have on the back of your program a little QR code. We don't have a big office next to Boeing down the way. You know, we make your money go a long way. So your donations are very much appreciated, and please continue to support us. We can't do it without you. Now here's a questionnaire part of my brief presentation. How many of you, is this your first Ron Paul Institute conference? Wow, that's great, that's great. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. The other thing I want to talk about is that yesterday, we did one of my favorite programs that the Ron Paul Institute does, which is we invested in the future, and that is through the Ron Paul Scholars Seminar. And this is our 4th Ron Paul Scholars Seminar. And what we do is we bring together upper division undergrads and grad students from all disciplines, This isn't just activists. We're an educational organization. And we bring them together for a day-long seminar, very hardcore seminar. And they are seated over here. Now it's our largest class ever, 16 Ron Paul scholars. Please give us some applause to the 2024 scholars. One more question. Are there any Ron Paul Scholars alumni here with us? Yes, there we go. There we go. We're investing in the future, and these are great young people. If you get a chance to talk to them in the breaks, they're fantastic. Who's been to all 8 conferences? That's my next question. Wow, that's great. That's great. 3 of you. Come see me later. I want to give you something. Okay, I'm serious. How many of you watched the Ron Paul Liberty Report? No, thank you. Now, we are not Judge Napolitano level viewerships, but we do reach about 70,000 people a day with our combined viewership and listenership. So it's not an easy show because we talk about stuff that can be a little bit depressing at times. So we're pretty grateful for that. We're pretty happy about that. And so in the time I have left, which is not much, my short talk is Peace Through Strength. And I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that the regime is dying. The regime that we live under, the totalitarian regime that we live under is dying. But the bad news, and this is, I'm stealing from my good friend Jim Jatras, who was one of the speakers yesterday, it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's the bad news. But the regime is weak. And how do we know it's weak? Because it is desperate to silence dissent. It's desperate to keep us from talking, listening to each other, listening to the judge's show, reading people who they don't want you to read. It shows that it's weak. Peace through strength. Well, weakness through war. That's the other side of that phrase. And it's true. The regime is weak. That's why it's striking out everywhere it can. Overseas, but also at home. Now, here are some signs that we've seen in the past couple of weeks. The raid of Scott Ritter's home. Scott Ritter's a journalist. He's a good friend of ours. He's spoken at our conference before. They went to his house, and the judge, I'm sure, might mention something about it. They went to his house with a SWAT team and a bomb squad, and they ransacked his house. They took everything he had. They took all of his papers for when he was a UN weapons inspector, when he revealed to the world that the war on Iraq was based on lies. They took everything. They're not going to give it back. Dimitri Simes is an American who came here from the Soviet Union, right? He escaped to freedom. He's been an advisor to President Nixon. He was the head of the Nixon Center that became the Center for the National Interest. His home in Virginia was raided. What is his crime? Well, he spoke out against the war in Ukraine. He doesn't agree with the Biden administration's slaughter of Ukrainians. That's why his home was raided. Pavel Durov was arrested in France. He's the founder of Telegram, right? Why do they hate Telegram? Because they allow free speech. For the most part, they're not perfect. But why do they also hate Telegram? Because they allow encrypted communications. And our intelligence agencies, the regime's intelligence agencies, wants to know what people are saying behind these encrypted conversations. And that's why he was arrested. Judge Napolitano, who you'll hear from very soon, well, he got a strike on his YouTube channel because someone went on his show and said something you're not allowed to say. Well, you say, that's not the government. Oh, really? You think that's not the government? That's the government. The Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal, who spoke here last year, he's been censored. He's had problems with YouTube. George Galloway, a great UK politician, he had, the moment, tell me about this coincidence, the moment Scott Ritter's home was raided, every interview he did with Scott Ritter was taken off of YouTube. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. We saw an article in the New York Times last week. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was about basically how the regime is cracking down on dissidents in America. And it goes into unnamed sources, unnamed government sources of telling them, we are cracking down. The raid on Scott Ritter's house, all the other things, that's only part of it, because we've got to crack down on Russian disinformation. And it feels like we woke up in 2016 all over again. But that's what they're doing, and they're doing it because the regime is weak and it's uncreative. They're reprising. It's like Hollywood. They're going to make a sequel of a 70s movie again and again and again and again. They're uncreative and they're weak. But they're good at killing people. The regime is good at killing people. And I hate to bring up these, but we need to digest some statistics. And the most recent one I had is from April. By April, 100,000 tons of weapons, of bombs, surpassing the total amount dropped on Dresden, Hamburg, and London combined, were dropped by Israel on Gaza, on civilians. Israel dropped 6 times more bomb power on Gaza than Hiroshima. And Gaza is 60% smaller than Hiroshima, right? You say, well, that doesn't affect us. We didn't do it. Well, those bombs say made in America. And in fact, a scumbag who used to be, sorry to use that word, who used to be our vice president actually signed a bomb. He signed a bomb that went and killed people, innocent people, 40,000 civilians, probably 3 times that much. So the regime is killing. This is the American regime that's funding and making this possible with intel, with bombs, with building a pier. Come on. 700,000 dead in Ukraine, probably at least. An entire generation of young men who will never get married, of young women who will never find a husband. This is also a genocide like Gaza. It's a genocide. 700,000 people at least slaughtered. And all due to the crazed obsession in Washington with world empire, with global empire. This obsession. And when the empire is weakest, it's most dangerous. But it is failing. And why is it failing? Well, because freedom and human action cannot be stopped. As Dr. Paul always says, an idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by all the armies of the world. And this is an idea that time has come. So, they sanction everything in sight. We talked about it yesterday at the seminar. A good part of the world is under U.S. sanctions, but something weird has happened. It doesn't work anymore. Because when you try to suppress commerce, action, communication, people will find a way around it, and that's what's happened. That's why we see the rise of the BRICS, right? Because we sanctioned all the countries, and they said, okay, well, why don't we get together, and why don't we do business, and why don't we start building things, and why don't we get away from the dollar? And that's what's happening. So the regime is committing suicide and taking us with it. And that's the problem. And that's why you see the rise of things like, and this is controversial, but the rise of Javier Milei in Argentina. Yes, he may have some libertarian tendencies. But the reason, in my view, that he's there is because the regime cannot stand to allow Latin America, South and Central America to go to the BRICS. And that's what they're doing. That's what we're seeing in places like Georgia, where we may well see a color revolution coming soon, because Georgia happened to pass a law saying, well, if you are a foreign-funded NGO, foreign government-funded NGO, well, you should probably register. I mean, we have the Foreign Agents Registration Act in the U.S. In fact, that's what they got Scott Ritter on. They said he has to be so talk about the hypocrisy of the regime. We raid Scott Ritter's house because he's not declaring himself to be a foreign agent, yet we're attacking Georgia because they adopt a Foreign Agents Registration Act to find out who is funding all these NGOs that are propping up politicians. So that's just a short way of saying the regime is dying. We're helping it. Hopefully we're nailing some nails into the coffin by being here, and that's why I'm so happy to have all of you here.